Good morning. Today we will discuss one of the most important statistical technique, that is correlation. So the first question is, what is correlation? Correlation basically it is a popular statistical measure that indicates a relationship between two or more variables. Now the first question is, what is variable? Anything, any value which gets changed, which is not fixed, which is not constant, that is known as variable. For example, age, height, all these values gets changed as per the change in case. So these are some examples of variables, and if we want to study the relationship between two or more variables, the statistical technique which we use, it is known as correlation. So basically it is concerned to find out whether the relationship exists or not between two or more variables. What's the degree of correlation? Suppose if there is a correlation between two or more variables, then what's the degree? Whether the relationship or association is strong or this relationship is weak. That is known as degree of correlation. And third, the most important thing, that is direction of relationship. Whether the relationship is a direct relationship or indirect relationship, or we can say whether the relationship or association is a positive relationship or negative relationship. So basically correlation is concerned with the three important things to find out whether there is an existence or absence of relationship, and if there is an existence or presence of relationship between two or more variables, then what's the degree of correlation, what's the degree of that association, whether the association is strong one or weak, then what's the direction of relationship, whether two or more variables are positively correlated or negatively correlated. Here are some examples through which we can study the relationship between two or more variables. For example, relationship between income and years of experience, relationship between amount of rainfall and yield of rice, relationship between price and demand of a commodity, relationship between nature of work and motivation to work, relationship between height and weight. So all these concepts like income, years of experience, rainfall, yield of rice, price, demand of a commodity like height and weight, all these are variables. And if we want to study the relationship, or we can say association, the statistical technique which we use, that is known as correlation. Then a correlation can be of different types, or we can say that relationship or association can be measured in different form. The first one is positive correlation. The correlation is said to be positive correlation if the values of two variables changing with same direction. Changes same direction means if there is an increase in one variable, simultaneously another variable is also like increasing. For example, relationship between public expenditure and sales. If there is an increase in public expenditure, this is quite obvious that there would be an increase in sales also. Similarly, if height is increasing, simultaneously weight will also get an increase. So this is a positive correlation. Then negative correlation. Correlation is said to be negative when the values of variables change with opposite direction. For example, a relationship between price and quantity demanded. If demand is increasing, or if there is an increase in price, demand would be less, and if price are decreasing, demand would be more. So there is a change in both the variables, but both variables are getting changed in opposite direction, which is known as negative correlation. But if direction is positive, if one variable is increasing and another variable is also increasing, then this is a positive relationship. If one variable is decreasing and another variable is also decreasing, again this is a positive relationship. But if the direction of this change is opposite, at one time one variable is increasing, other variable is decreasing, that is known as negative correlation. Then if we plot the relationship between two variables in the form of a graph, in the form of a scatter diagram, then this is the graphical representation of a positive correlation. As we can see, the relationship can be expressed in the form of a linear line, that is straight line, and its direction is from downward to upward and from left to right. This is an example of positive correlation between two variables, that is, one is calories consumed and another one is weight gained. Similarly, if we talk about negative correlation, this is the straight line which represents negative correlation between two variables x and y, which indicates if there is an increase in one variable, simultaneously the value of other variable is decreasing. The direction of negative correlation is like from upward to downward, again from left to right. Then another type of correlation is simple and multiple, and further multiple correlation can be divided between two parts. One is partial and another one is total. Now first question is, what is simple correlation? If we are studying the relationship between two variables only, for example relationship between height and weight, relationship between price and supply, relationship between price and demand, relationship between rainfall and yield of crop, relationship between public expenditure and sales. So if at one time we are studying the relationship, we are considering only two variables, that kind of correlation is simple correlation. Another type of correlation is multiple correlation. Uh, Under multiple correlation, first comes that is partial correlation. Under partial correlation, what we do, one time we consider more than two variables. It can be three variables, it can be three or more variables. But one time we will study the relationship between two variables only, taking the effect of third variable as constant, or we can say taking the third variable as constant. For example, relationship between price, demand, and income. So if we are taking three variables, but at one time we are studying the relationship between price and demand only, considering the income as a constant factor, as a constant variable, then that kind of relationship is partial correlation. But in case of total correlation, we study the relationship among three or more variables at one time. We consider all the variables. Then next type is linear correlation and non-linear correlation. In case of linear correlation, it is said to be linear when the amount of change in one variable tends to bear a constant ratio to the amount of change in the other. For example, there are certain values of x variables and these values are getting an increase by number 1, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. When the value of x is 1, the value of y is 5. When the value of x is 2, the value of y is 7. What does it mean? Every time when the value of x is increasing by number 1, there is a change in value of y, that is every number is getting an increase by number 2. So every time the change which is occurring in the value of y is constant, that is an increase by number 2. So that kind of relationship, that kind of correlation is known as linear correlation. But in case of non-linear correlation, uh, the amount of change in one variable does not bear a constant ratio to the amount of change in other variable. For example, if the values of x are increasing by number 1, the amount of change in the values of y would be different. Sometimes value would be increasing by 2, sometimes it can be 3, it can be 4, it can be 5. The rate of change in another variable would not be constant in case of nonlinear